Good evening, friends. Myself is Sudhasre, and today's our topic is methods of GPA. So, first of all, we will discuss about the what is the JPA. So, JPA is a Spring Boot. It's a Spring Boot. JPA is a Java specification of the managing relationship data, relational data in a Java application. It allow us to access and persist data between Java object and class relational database. JPA follow the object relational mapping, is called as a ORM. It is a set of interfaces. It's also provide a runtime entity manager API for processing queries and transaction of an objects against the database. It uses a platform independent object oriented query language. It's JPQL, Java Persistence Query Language. In context of the persistence, it covers three areas. So first one is the Java Persistence API, object relational metadata. The API itself defines the persistence package. The JPI is not a framework. It is a defined concept that can be implemented by the frameworks. So we discuss about the why should we use JPA. JPA is a simple, cleaner, and less labor intensive than JDBC, SQL, and handwritten mapping. JPA is suitable for non-performance oriented complex application. The main advantages of JPA over the JDBC is that in JPA data is represented by the objects and classes, while the JDBC data is represented by the table and records. It's used the POJO to represent the persistence class that simplify the database programming. There are some other advantages of JPA is JPA avoids the written DDL in the database specific dialect of the SQL. Instead of this, it's allow the mapping in XML or using Java annotations. JPA allow us to avoid the written DML in the database specific declaration of the SQL. JPA allow us to save and load the Java objects and graphs without any DML language. When we need to perform the queries, JPQL, it's allow us to express the queries in the term of Java entities rather than the native SQL table and columns. So we discuss about the features of JPA. It is a powerful repository and custom object mapping abstraction. It support for the cross-store persistence. It means an entity can be partially stored in MySQL and Neo4j data management system. It's dynamically generate query from the query methods name. The domain-based class provides the best properties. It supports the transparent audio possibility to integrate the custom repository code. It is easy to integrate with Spring framework with the custom namespaces. So we will discuss about the Java JPA architecture. JPA is a source to store the business entities and relational entities. It shows how to define a POJO as an entity, how to manage the entities with the relation. It's follow the figure describe the class level architecture of JPA. JPA that describe the core classes and interfaces of JPA. That is defined in the Java Persistence package. The JPA architecture contains some units. So first is the persistence. It is a class that contains the static method to obtain an entity manager factory instance. So entity manager factory. It is a factory class of entity manager. It creates a manager multiple instance of a entity manager. Entity manager, it is an integer interface. It controls the persistence operation on the object. It's work from the query instance. Next one is the entity. The entity are the persistence object stored as a record in the database. Next one is the persistence unit. It's define a set of all entities, classes in an application. The entity manager, instance manager manage it. The set of entity classes represent the data contents within the single data code. So next one is the entity transaction. It has a one-to-one relationship with the entity manager class. For each entity manager, operation are maintained by the entity transaction class. Next one is the query. It is an interface that is implemented by the each JPA vendor to obtain the relation object that meet the so next one is the JPA class relationship. The class is the interface. Classes and interface that we have discussed about maintain the relationship. The some so class relationship. The relationship between the entity manager and entity transaction is a one-to-one. There is an entity transaction instance for each entity manager operation. The relationship between the entity manager manage factory and the entity manager is the one-to-many, which is a factory class to entity manager instance. The relationship between the entity manager and the query is a one-to-many. We can execute the any number of query by using an instance of the entity manager class. The relationship between the entity manager and the entity is one-to-many, and entity manager instance can manage the multiple entities. So next one is JPA implementation. JPA is a one source API. There is a various enterprise vendor such as Eclipse, Red Hat, Oracle, etc. that provide the products by the adding the JPA in them. There are popular JPA implementation frameworks such as Hibernate, Eclipse Link, Data Nucleus, etc. It's also known as object-oriented mapping. It's a ORM. So object-oriented mapping is a ORM. The mapping of the Java object to database table. The vice versa is called as object relational mapping. The ORM mapping work as a bridge between the relationship between tables and records. The Java applications, classes and interfaces, objects objects. So ORM layer exists between the application and the database. Some methods are native. These all about the today's topic. Thank you.